Well, welcome to a new Harry's Farm video. And yes, we've got flooded fields again. I mean, this is the grass down here. There's a little brook the other side. And this is pretty bad flooding, but we've had it a lot worse down here. So I thought it's time I did another Harry's Farm video because there's so much going on in the farming world. So we're going to look at sort of what's happening on my farm just here and the crops and that sort of thing, but also the bigger picture and the protests going on in Europe. Got to comment on that, and is that going to come to the UK as well? But yeah, just kicking off with what's been happening since the last report. Well, I thought it was drying out in January, but no. As soon as February arrived, and we're only on the 11th of February today, yeah, we've had 60 mil in February so far. We had 60 mil in the whole of January, but we also had 60 mil Christmas Day and that little bit of December after Christmas. Nearly 180 mil of rain in not very long, just about 5-6 weeks. And the ground has just had enough. It will not dry out. We're going to have a look at the arable fields in a moment. The grass can cope with this. This field down here, sorry if it's a bit windy, this grass is all drowned, underwater. Fortunately, it does disappear. So I have no ill effects from this water down here. It doesn't actually kill the grass. It's a floodplain in effect down here, and it's very used to it. But out on the arable crops, well, they've really had enough. So let's get out of here and let's go and have a look at some of the crops on the farm. This wheat is not my best looking wheat on the farm by a long stretch. It probably is the worst looking wheat, but this field here has just had enough of all this rain. You can see a sort of tide mark here. The water has gone right down from where it was. I was out here 2-3 days ago and this was just underwater, and it's just like being on a beach when you get sort of a storm and everything comes in. You can see all the straw that's been washed through here. And this has just had enough. This isn't going to yield anything here, but this, thank goodness, is in the Countryside Stewardship, the new agreement, that 5-year term that starts from when this harvest is over, in effect. And this will all be put down to a sort of grass mix, and we won't be growing crops here anymore. And I'm very glad about that, because it just takes out a real problem area. When we get a significant amount of rain and consistent for months, then this field just sort of slumps, and you can see it's just a low point. I'm on Cotswold Brash, this shouldn't be happening, but if we walk through to the other field, you can see there's actually water sitting on that field as well. And there's nothing I can really do about it. It's not drainage, there's no point sort of moulding it. This is just the weather conditions that seem to have changed, and we get this amount of rainfall. If you look here, this is a 4-metre grass margin that I put in 2004. So this has been grass here for 20 years. So it's not the way we're farming, it's just the change in climate and this, persistent rain that we've had over this winter. The weird thing about this winter is we've had rain, but we've also had mild temperatures. We haven't really had real frost. I looked back, the last proper frost was a -7, which is a good temperature, on the 18th of Jan. And then we haven't had anything really since then, the odd 0.2 or -0.2 degrees. But yeah, it's been a challenging year. Let's go and have a look at some better crops just we walk through here. Are you coming through, Stan? Now we've only gone, I don't know, 20 metres from where we were all flooded. Look at this wheat here. I mean, this is a tough bit of ground. This is a third wheat. So I've only put a third wheat in because I didn't get to hear about my stewardship in time. We got to hear just before Christmas, about 18th of December, that I could go into the scheme. Otherwise, this would be rested enhanced stubble, as they term it. But this is third wheat, and yeah, this is the difference when you get at the low point like that and it's flooded out. This is looking reasonably good for a third wheat. I'm quite pleased with it. there's no real issues. We've kept on top of slugs and things, and although at one point I thought I was going to lose about 20% of our wheat area to flooding, I've now revised that. I've cheered up a bit. I think we're about 10% of our wheat has been lost to these flooded areas. But the other thing that's happened since sort of Christmas time is the dramatic drop in wheat prices. As I say, I did that pool for Harvest 23, and it all went, well, basically in September, August, September, harvest movement. And that was about £192 a tonne. If I still had the same wheat in the shed and I wanted to get it moved in February, March time, well, we're looking now £155 a tonne. Huge drop, nearly £40 a tonne drop. That would just shoot the sort of budget to pieces. I'm not sure why are you so excited, Stanley? Stanley, why are you so excited? Here. Not sure why it's so excited this afternoon. Probably because the wheat's cheered up. And the other thing, apart from that one frost I mentioned, the reason why the wheat is sort of perking up is soil temperature. Soil temperature is relatively high for this time of year, so the wheat has just started to grow away, which is another good sign as well. I'm going to walk over to this other field over here, because that is an absolute picture. It's the first wheat and looks really good. Yeah, so much better wheat looking on this side. Yeah, these deer are just a pest to me. They seem to know when I'm about to do some filming and they come out to have a look. They like being on camera or something. I don't know. They live actually in a wood on another estate the other side generally, but they seem to pop in here every now and then. But anyway, what we want to look at is the wheat in here. Yes, this is a bit grot here. This area again is going into a stewardship area from this September. As soon as this harvest is over, then this gets planted out and we won't be cropping it again for another 5 years. But the rest of the field, absolute picture. You can see how the wheat has started to get going. This is actually tillering out now. Couldn't be healthier. Really chuffed with it. And I've got quite a lot of first wheats looking as good as this. There's a little bit of weed I've noticed in some other fields. I've got some cleavers just coming up. I'm just looking to see if there's any weeds here. Because the other thing with that amount of rainfall, the residual herbicide that's sort of capped on the soil breaks down if you have so much rain. But I would say that's pretty clean. So I'm chuffed with that. I can't really show you much. And I've got that other farm, and we actually put some in with that direct drill. Remember that John Deere drill we had out in October, and this was put in with the Claydon drill. And we're now seeing a difference between the two drills, and the direct drill's wheat isn't looking as good as the Claydon drill. The Claydon sort of boils the soil more, there's much more soil movement, it incorporates the straw, and just by doing that you do release a little bit of nitrogen. So the crop I would expect to look slightly better, but the direct drilled stuff is just a bit behind, hasn't quite tilled as much. It's almost as though the soil has slumped. We've had so much rain that because the soil wasn't opened up, because we didn't use a cultivator drill, it just doesn't seem to be coming out the winter looking as good as the Claydon drilled wheat. And it does put a question mark in my head. The way we're putting wheat in at the moment is so versatile that we can go into all sorts of soil conditions because of the way the drill works. It does seem to me as though we're going to stick with it for the time being, but we'll probably have another trial of a direct drill, but we're certainly not rushing into it with the way it's all working on the farm. Now also, as I was saying, that the wheat price has dropped away. I did my initial budget thinking £200. It was going to be possible for harvest 24. I think today a more realistic figure is about £170 a tonne. Big drop again. And I'm surprised by that, but the trade, they don't take any nonsense. They look at what supplies we have, what's in the ground, who's going into these schemes, and they think there's a surplus in Europe of wheat. So that's why the price has dropped. There's something going to be called a carryover. It's actually, some people are looking for 23 harvest. It's worthwhile them keeping it in store for a whole year and not selling it until late July, August, when you normally expect what is termed new crop, so the wheat you've just harvested, to sell old crop as new crop then, because that will probably pay, because there's a higher price for harvest 24 than there is right now for the wheat. They're paying about £150. So yeah, you get £170 if you keep it that long. But you've got to have a pretty robust bank account to stand a whole year with no income off your farm and just get the payment then. So what I'm looking at now on this farm, the immediate thing in the next few weeks, is when we go on with the first application of nitrogen in this field. I've got some areas where we're putting in some of the stewardship schemes. They've just going to be scratched up and sprayed off, ready to drill in something else. So that's immediately what's happening on the farm here. Oh, I'm also putting in a new application for SFI. Now we have the stewardship scheme, I know what's in there. I'm now filling in an application for a SFI, and we're putting in the ones that I've looked at to go into, well, hedgerows. We're going to have a little bit of management of hedgerows, but we haven't really got any hedgerows on this farm. We've got stone walls. So I've got something like 400, 500 metres of hedge, but I've got 2.2 kilometres of stone walls. So that's the big one I'll be putting in, the maintenance of those stone walls, but that application doesn't open until the summer. The other thing we're going for is IPM4, as it's termed, no use of insecticide. So we will not use insecticides on the farm, because it's £45 a hectare to do that, and I'm prepared to do that, and also do some soil testing and monitoring on that, which is all part of the initial application for the Sustainable Farming Incentive, as it's termed, the SFI. Yeah, we ought to look at the bigger picture stuff. What's been going on in Europe? Huge protests taking place, and I have some sympathy for them, and particularly with the German and French farmers, Dutch. I mean, well, actually, there's quite a few regions. What has happened over there is the EU implemented a scheme for a whole region, and it's always dangerous doing that because the EU is quite a big area. 2 years ago, it was part of a so-called Green Deal. Brussels set out plans to halve the number of pesticides and other hazardous chemicals used in agriculture. And you think, hang on a minute, why are we doing this? Food production will suffer by doing this, and there hasn't really been consultation. And to ban it right across the EU, these insecticides and pesticides we'll be able to continue using in the UK, would change dramatically how they farm over there. They also demanded, oh, by the way, we want 4% of your ground not to grow crops, so a set aside as well. And then there's the German one where they're going to reduce the red diesels we get in agriculture, and also military and fishing fleet as well. They were changing the taxation on that, and suddenly that was going to go right up as well. And it was all coming out of Brussels, and it was all this sort of faceless, in their words, sort of suits in Brussels, changing the way they were meant to be farming. And if you get a market like France, where the farmers and wine growers and stuff is part of the fabric of the country, they do not like being dictated by faceless people in Brussels, hence the riots. And it's worked for them. I mean, good on them, but they have now paused. They're not doing this green policy. They've had to backtrack completely on that. The Germans have had to backtrack on the diesel front, and things are in discussion, and those protests have calmed down, and they've got basically what they wanted. They've got people to really concentrate. Is this the right direction? Are we going to do the same thing in the UK? Well, it's more complicated over here because of devolution. We're all now these separate areas. So England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland all have different views on how they're going to run the agricultural policy going forward after Brexit. Here in England, they started cutting the single area payment. We were on this taper down. So it had already started with us. And then they basically showed us, well, we're going to cut those, but we're going to offer you this. And there was a bit of, we were a bit grumpy because we weren't knowing the rates, but we finally got the rates last year in 23, and then they upped the rates on January the 4th, and we got the SFI. So we sort of know what we're doing now, and it is a workable scheme. I've de-risked this farm. Many other farmers are doing the same in England. In Wales, oh my goodness, complete mess over there. The Welsh government was trying to introduce something called the SFS scheme, and that is the Sustainable Farming Scheme. Now, 17 directives within the scheme, but 2 compulsory ones. One of them was 10% of your ground, take out of farming, plant trees, and the other 10% of ground also had to go into wildlife habitat areas. Massive change, huge policy change. If someone said to me, oh, by the way, yeah, you carry on farming, but we want 10% of your ground into trees, I'd say, no way, no way. So the Welsh are getting properly upset, and rightly so. And the other thing is, they don't have any budget, the Welsh government, to do this, so they can't actually tell farmers what rates they're going to get paid. There is a consultation that ends on the 7th of March, and just from, even though they don't know the rates, there is protests just starting to gather in Wales, and I don't blame them at all. They're looking at a potential 122,000 livestock units going off the land, so that's around 800,000 sheep. If a livestock unit is 1 cow basically, or bullock. So yeah, 800 sheep potentially being lost in Wales if these go through, and they're trying to base it on income lost, the rates. They still don't know the rates, and they're going to base them on the year where they had a 37% drop in income and were struggling to survive. So if they do bring rates in, they're going to be on a year that was a dreadful year for farming in Wales as well. They also have a real strict nitrogen regime over there, nitrogen in water, runoff. You can't put slurry on the land, and also this is a livestock basic farming community, the Welsh farms, and it's tough enough without these draconian rules coming in. Little thing on planting trees, an arable acre like this has a higher value than trees because it's flexible. I can plant different crops, it's all part of farming. If I plant trees, I've basically lost that ground for the next 50, 100 years. It will not ever grow crops. All I look at is trees. So if I was to sell the farm, I would expect 30% less value for the land that's got trees on than arable land. So if you're asking a landowner, say, oh, by the way, just put 10% of your land into trees, the compensation bill for doing that, because you can't trade, there's no income foregone on 10% of your farm, would be huge. So I think there's lots of discussions on that one. It'd be very interesting in how militant, shall we say, the Welsh farmers gets, but I can quite understand it. It's just a bit weird that in England, we know the scheme, we can sort of work with it. We think it's a bit mad because there's no food security, but if the wheat price is dropping like that, then the traders know something. They're not worried about the drop in food production in the UK. They think the price is not going to dramatically shoot up. They should know, don't they? So we'll go with the scheme at the moment, but it is reversible because the land is still there and could go straight back into food production if that's what we were directed to do in England. In Wales, planting trees, no, that's it, it's gone forever. Well, not gone forever, but gone for a significant length of time. Scotland also, they're in debate as well. They don't know their rates yet, so unfortunately, they can't plan as we can in England, and in Ireland they're under EU rules and they're not at all happy, so I can see that getting a bit ugly as well. So yeah, big picture stuff on farming is, I've never known a period like it in Europe of how much protesting and anger there is amongst the farming community because of this regulation coming out of Brussels, and is it the sensible move? Very interesting. But here on the farm here, pretty good really. I just want it to cheer up and stop raining, get the crops on and just get moving, doing some field work and that sort of thing. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, well, keep watching, keep subscribing. More videos coming along very soon. You're going to do a spin? That's not a good spin. Do another spin. There we are. There we go. Yeah.